Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. We are almost ready to get things started. We're about 10 minutes away from getting things going for today's Network Plus study group. Today is all about me asking questions from the Network Plus exam, at least in the first hour. In the second hour, you ask me questions. It's the after show is the second hour. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. I've already done the podcast intro. You missed that part. It's compelling. I may have to recreate that part for you. It's so good. Or you'll just have to listen to the first 10 seconds of the podcast and you'll have it. I've got recordings going here. That's my OBS streaming device. Hello, chat room. I've got recordings going down here. You can see the Cylons are going down there. There they are. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Checking the cameras on my laptop. Timed out. There we go. Yep, we got a good signal there. I think we're in pretty good shape. We're in pretty good shape. We could use some cleaner glasses. It's the little things at this point. I could probably use a different configuration altogether. I think we're in pretty good shape. This is not what you will see for the study group. For the study group, you see this part. No, not that part. That's the title slide. You see that part in the study group. That's what you'll see. It's me without glasses, though. It was kind of creepy, though. It's kind of freak everybody out. What happened? What was that? Got to fix that. It'll be embedded in your brains. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. See? Now I can see you. Well, I mean, I can't see you, but you know what I'm saying. Okay. We've got what else ready to go? I think we're in pretty good shape. Hi, chat room. Portland's here. Toronto is here. Colorado Springs is here. Tallahassee checking in. All the way from Tallahassee checking in. I think that's in Florida. We've got Raleigh, North Carolina is checking in. Welcome. Where do you go to participate in answering questions? I'll give you all that information when we begin. You can pop open a new browser window right now, though, and go to professormesser.com/QA. We can do that. Now everybody's checking in. California, Nashville, North Carolina, and Tennessee, and Cape Town. Welcome. New York, Vegas is here. Utica, Mesquite, Texas, welcome. Manchester in the UK, welcome. Houston, another Cape Town. Birmingham, which is exactly how they say it in the UK. St. Louis is here. Colorado, Dallas, Texas, welcome. Canada checking in, thank you. I'll let Mrs. Professor Messer know you were here. Saudi Arabia, welcome. Southern Indiana, NV, Nevada, I'm thinking. There's Jacksonville, more Florida people checking in, welcome. New York State. Detroit, Ireland. Sarasota is here. Mogadishu. Sacramento, California. Welcome. Delaware. Birmingham, Alabama. Denmark. Somalia. Maryland. El Paso. Lancaster. There's a lot of people checking in. Welcome. I saw a Network Plus video of mine from 10 years ago. Can I bring back the funky jazz music? Well, interestingly enough, we cannot bring back the funky jazz music, not because I don't like it, but because the world doesn't like it, as it turns out. When that happened, when I was making those videos, there were, and there continue to be, challenges around having music in a video. Music of any kind, even if it is music that is licensed, which mine is, even if it was music that was perfectly legal, which mine is. There are still places in the world. Well, I won't say still places in the world, but there were places in the world, looking at you, Germany, that completely banned any video with music, period. And it created a problem because there were a number of people in Germany, especially people who were on base, in American bases on Germany, that were trying to use my training videos and couldn't because they were blocked by the local ISP. So that's why you don't get music on my videos anymore. I just don't put it. It's too much of a hassle. And at the end of it, was it really that great? Really? I mean, it was interesting, I guess, the first time, maybe the second time. I do have music, a different kind of music on my podcast side because podcasts don't go through the same political rigmarole. I don't want to call it political rigmarole. There was a good reason they were making sure that everybody's music got paid properly, that the people who created content were getting compensated properly for their content. But that's a pretty ham-fisted way to do it. That since we don't know how to do it, we're going to block everything. Even if it has 5 seconds of audio at the beginning and 5 seconds at the end. So there you go. That's why there's no more funky music. It was literally called something funk, I think. That's why there's no more funky music at the beginning and end of my videos. Because it's just too much of a hassle, unfortunately. Kind of weird, isn't it? That's kind of what you have to do in here to make that happen. But if that's the worst thing that we have to deal with, I think it's okay. You can, in your mind, in fact, if you really, really want to listen to it, I will send you the link to the page where you could purchase or at least listen to a sample of the song so that you can start my video and then start the sample page at the same time, and it'll have the same feel as if I was doing it. That might be something that might help. I don't know if you really want to do that. 4 minutes to go, everybody. 4 minutes. Benjamin says there's bad storms coming in. I feel you, brother. Being in Florida, that's kind of how it goes. Our bad storms came through this weekend, so we're through it right now. Now I'm gonna have to find the link. Now I'm gonna have to go find the name of it, which I got to now remember the name. So I'm gonna have to pour through all of this. Actually, it's probably on my hard drive, my SSD. So if I look for funk, I found it. Is this it? No, I think that's the one I use for my podcast. Maybe that wasn't the name now I'm thinking about it. Maybe it was Dog. It's Brown Dog. This takes me back because I haven't used this audio in so long that now I have to look for it. And it may be on my NAS, because that's not finding it for sure. Okay, well we'll figure this out. If this becomes so compelling to you that you must know, I will probably put it on my website. If you send me an email, I'll send you the link. Not of the song, but I'll put a link in the studio configuration. If you want to see all of this stuff that's in front of me and you want to know what is that, what is this thing, and what does that thing do, you can go to professormesser.com/studio and do that. The podcasts are just a replay of this live event. So it's just the study group in audio form. You can find out about it, professormesser.com/podcast. And that'll take you to all the list of all the podcasts. It's just in case you have a podcasting program and just want everything going through. How's cricket withdrawal going? Funny you would ask. Saturday, I got the old logo shirt here. Saturday, Australian rules football starts up. So that's what this is about today. Very rarely do you see me wearing anything sports related. And to be fair, this is completely outdated. I think Melbourne changed their logo in 1995, maybe 2005. Maybe it wasn't that long ago, but it was a long time ago that they changed their logo. I kept the shirt though. Keeping the shirt, Melbourne. So I think Carlton plays Melbourne on Saturday. So that's what's going on. That's why that's there. But the whole cricket withdrawal, you spend so much time on YouTube replaying the things you missed, and eventually you run out. I don't have that much time to do it. It'll go up on the side and it'll just play there while I'm trying to do something else. So that's that's about. Planning to take the 1001 by July. That is a lot of information. You should focus on everything listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. If you do not have the CompTIA exam objectives, go to professormesser.com/objectives and download them immediately. That applies not just your A+, but your Network Plus, Security Plus. And you'll hear me say that only 10 or 20 more times today. That's how important it is. So that's why we go through that process of doing any of those things. So we'll figure out the details in just a bit. Whenever we start breaking down what we're going to do today, it's all about you answering questions. So we'll give you some questions starting up shortly. We got 30 seconds. We'll get this thing ready to go. See what happens with this. I love the networking piece. I think the networking piece is really the core of everything we do in IT. So this is always fun to go through some of these networking pieces. Let's get this playing. Let's get rid of our clock. Let's bring up our keynote. Let's make sure we can connect to it over the network. Green light. Excellent. Very nice. I think it's time for a study group, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2020 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. June 2020 already, and we have got all Network Plus questions for you. In this first hour, I will be asking you questions that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. And in the second hour, kind of open up the phone lines. We turn this thing around so you ask me questions, and I'll take questions from the chat room. I'll take questions from people who call in. I'll give you information on how to do all of that in just a moment. We're going to focus today, though, on the CompTIA exam objectives for Network Plus. The way that you can participate, if you're watching this live, you can participate by locking in the answers for these questions. You go to professormesser.com/QA. So pop open a new browser window. You can go right to that link, professormesser.com/QA. If you'd like an app that does this for you, you want to look for the Socrative student app on your favorite app store or app place. And the Socrative student app will ask you for a room name. The room name, Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you won't be able to get into that room. Now, if you go to professormesser.com/QA, it won't ask you for a room name. It's very easy to get there, and then you can just stay on that page. And if you do everything right, there's a question waiting for you right now on that page. That question asks, which of the following would be the most common choice for the console on a switch? We call this our rewind question because it's a question from last month. We're going to see if you can get in and answer the question properly and see if you remember everything from last month. Which of the following would be the most common choice for the console connection on a switch? Would it be RJ11, BNC, F connector, DB9, or MTRJ? If you think you know the answer, remember, no answers in the chat room. You want to instead go to this link, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. We'll come back to that answer in just a moment. I want to thank you for being here. We've got so many things going on throughout the month. We do one of these study groups every month. We do multiple study groups every month, but only one for Network Plus. We have, of course, the replay of all of those study groups going back years you can find on our YouTube channel. Make sure you visit there. And if you would be so nice enough to subscribe, it really does help. I get to talk to the nice people at YouTube directly because you help support what we're doing here. It does go a long way, and it's a way that you could help the site by simply punching the button at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about our weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus at professormesser.com/Twitter. And you'll notice that our weekly pop quiz questions are also available on Instagram, which is kind of an interesting twist, where I ask you the question and then there's a pretty picture to go along with it. And if it's a Network Plus, it's a picture of a bridge somewhere. That's sort of the theme that you will see for Network Plus. One way that you can also support us financially is if you're someone who buys things from Amazon, you can visit our website first. Go to professormesser.com/Amazon. On your way to their site, they will give us a little bit of a commission when you purchase things, and you still pay the same price. So it's a nice way to help support us, and every little bit does tend to count, helps keep the lights on, what we're doing here. Today, we're going to talk all about the Network Plus certification. It is the N10-007 is the current version as we sit here in June of 2020. This is a version that was released on March of 2018. We expect the retirement date for this exam will be somewhere around September of 2021. I'm assuming that will be the date, but if they stay the way they always do, it's about 3.5 years after the release, and that's how you come up with that date. So the point, though, if you're studying right now in June 2020 for your Network Plus certification, you got plenty of time before you ever have to worry about the exam changing under your feet. So September 1st, 2021, you got plenty of time. Now, if you're watching this and it's September of 2021, you may want to make sure that you're studying for the right exam. So that's why I give that date. This is an exam, a single exam. You don't have to take multiple exams for this. You have to pass one exam. It's a 90-minute exam. You could get as many as 90 questions. Not everybody gets 90 questions, but you could get 90 questions on the exam. You have to pass with a score of 720, which is on a scale from 100 to 900. I know, it's weird, but I don't make these things up. That's just what it is. And they don't tell you how much each question is worth. So really, there's no way to tell. You just have to do the best you can and hope that the final score comes out to be 720 or higher. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions, very similar to the one you just saw, and also performance-based questions, which will be very similar to the one you're about to see. So we have different kinds of questions that you will run into. I obviously have tons of content on my site. There are videos and audio and course notes and so many different things. What I've tried to do is put them all together into one single bundle. This is my success bundle, and I try to put everything there. So if you wanted course notes and you wanted my exam hacks ebook, which by the way is only available in my success bundle, the exam hacks ebook is a set of, I think I'm up to 13, 14, maybe 15 different tips on how to study for the exam and what to do during the exam from a strategy perspective. They don't often tell you that. They tell you what you need to know, but they don't tell you how you can best optimize your test taking. That's what I tried to do with my Exam Hacks ebook. If you want to learn more about this, you can find it at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We've also got an audio version of this. You can, of course, go to my site and watch the video replay of this immediately after it's done. But there's also an audio version for those of you that are working out, you're in your car, you just like a podcast version that can download automatically to your device when it's available. You can find out about that at professormesser.com/podcast. I'll also let you know that about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, hi, Lori, she's listening and watching this on the replay, and she's building out for you a list of the timestamps. So you'll be able to jump exactly where you need to go to find exactly what you want during this entire video that's in the YouTube video description. You can find it in the listing, and it'll show you exactly when the questions start, when the answers are, and it may be a quick way to find something that you might be looking for later on. Let's go back to that question I asked originally, which was, which of the following would be the most common choice for the console on a switch? The answers were RJ11, BNC, F connector, DB9, and MTRJ. And you can see that 58% of you said DB9 is what you would use. 11% said an F connector. 17% said RJ11. And then you got single digits, MTRJ only 9%, BNC only 5%. So you've got a few options there to choose from. For those of you that have plugged into a console connection on a switch before, you know it's a serial connection. So sometimes on the newer switches, it's a USB connection directly into the device. On many existing devices, you'll find a serial connection that's either DB9 most likely. And if it's a really old device, maybe DB25. You don't often see many serial connections doing DB25 any longer. But if you're plugging in, this DB9 serial connection for RS-232 has been around forever. And you'll find that it's one of those things that if you are an engineer or you're somebody who's a field tech, you've always got your DB9s, your USBs, your null modem cables. You've got so many different cables and combinations. I used to carry a cable that was an RJ45, and then I had modular RJ45 connections that I would plug into it. I'd figure out what I needed on both sides, click, click, and then I'd be able to plug in. So those are very useful to have that there. You may find other types of connections on your devices. It might be USB. It might be RJ45 directly in using a serial connection. There might be a serial connection with RJ11. I have a power distribution unit here in the studio that uses RJ11, but none of those were part of the question. The question asked what would be the most common choice for the console connection based on these numbers here, based on the options here. RJ11 could have been, but you don't usually see RJ11 on a switch. That is certainly not the most common choice. DB9 was the only other connection. BNC is the rounded bayonet Neil Councilman connector that you might find on video or wide area network systems. F connector is the screw-on connector you use on a cable modem or telephone cable television. So that's not the type of connector you would find on a switch. And MTRJ is a fiber connection. You never find fiber connections for a console connection on a switch. You did not have the choice of USB here. You did not have the choice of RJ45, which means the only choice here that you have available is DB9. That's the only one you could possibly use. That is the right answer, and 60% of you either got that one right or you must have remembered what it must have been to have that connection there. Well done. So that gets us through the very first rewind question. You now know how to get into answering the questions. You're able to use these types of connections or these types of answers on the Socrative front end. What I like to do as my first new question of the month, though, is ask you a performance-based question. This is a question that is not a multiple-choice-based question. You'll get a handful of performance-based questions at the beginning of your exam. A lot of people are concerned about this. They think they're all going to be simulation questions that you're going to be put down in a command prompt and asked to perform a function. And you might. However, most of the questions you get on the exam are not that type of simulation. Most of them are other types of questions. They might be fill in the blank. You might have to do drag and drop. There might be questions where you have to put things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You might have to put things in a matching order. It can be a lot of different things. I think a lot of people maybe overthink or worry too much about what this might be. So I have for you a performance-based question that you can go through that I think is pretty good for evaluating where you might stand with these types of questions. Here is our performance-based question of the month. It asks, categorize the following protocols as secure or insecure. And there are 6 protocols here. I have SSH, HTTPS, Telnet, SFTP, SNMPv1, and IPsec. Now, again, no answering in the chat room. We've got the link right here that you'll want to do. This is effectively a fill in the blank. So you could either, you don't have to type in the word secure, insecure. You can use S for secure or I for insecure, and maybe you just put them in order, all 6 of them. So if you think they're all insecure, you would put I. That's a very quick way to do it, unless you'd like to type really fast. And you could also lock it in that way as well. Which of the following protocols, of all of these protocols, which ones are secure and which ones are insecure? So see if you happen to remember what those happen to be. There is a section of the exam to be able to understand exactly what the different protocols, security type might be. So this is a good place. From the chat room, don't you need to understand the foundation of Network Plus in order to pass the Security Plus certification exam? Actually, there's very little overlap between the Network Plus and Security Plus. I think I actually saw the number of exam objectives, and I think 12% of the exam overlaps. That's a pretty small amount. So of that 12%, you could probably learn it during the process of the Security Plus certification exam. It's such a small amount. And I realize people, they may get confused about that, because you very commonly hear me say that a huge part of IT security has a foundation in networking. You really do need to be a network expert to be able to be very good with IT security. And I think I still stand by that. It's very important. But the exam objectives for Security Plus tend to focus on security. The exam objectives for Network Plus tend to focus on networking, and they try not to overlap that very much. So that's where you'd run into those problems or run into those challenges as you work through all of these things, is the exams themselves are quite different to have those there. So hopefully that will help you as far as that goes. Let's see how you did with these. We wanted to categorize the following protocols as secure or insecure. The 6 protocols were SSH, HTTPS, Telnet, SFTP, SNMPv1, and IPsec. And I think you have to be really careful when putting these in too, because some of them are very obviously secure. Some of them you might be on trying to figure this out. So let's step through them one at a time. The first is SSH. Now, if you know what SSH stands for, it might help you, because that is secure shell. That is effectively the console type connection you would use at the command line over the network, and it's the secure or encrypted version of that. So SSH, perhaps an easy start, is a secure type protocol. HTTP is obviously the protocol we use in our browsers, very common protocol to be able to use that. The hypertext transfer protocol, when you put an S on the end of it, it means that it is secure. So that one is also a secure protocol. Telnet, although there's not an S there, is a protocol that we would use to be able to connect through a console connection. If it has an S or not an S, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is secure or not secure. But if you've ever used Telnet and you perform a packet capture, you'll notice that everything is in the clear. That is a horribly insecure protocol. Never, 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 never use Telnet. Another protocol is SFTP. The S is at the beginning. Now, does that mean it's secure, or does it mean something else? Again, it's one of those cases where we really do need to know the protocol that is FTP. It's a secure version of FTP. As it turns out, there's 2 different FTPs, an SFTP and an FTPS, both of which are considered to be secure protocols. So that's another gimme if you happen to know that. The next one, another S protocol, SNMPv1. The S at the beginning obviously means simple. It does not mean secure. And the Simple Network Management Protocol version 1 is an in the clear, insecure version of that protocol. You would want SNMP version 3 to be able to use a secure version of this protocol. And last on our list is IPsec. IPsec, the second IPsec is security. So that one is another one, I think, that is a useful term to know. So that is secure, absolutely. It's a very common way to tunnel traffic securely between devices or locations over a VPN tunnel. It's one of the very common ways to see IPsec being used. And hopefully you got these right. SSH is secure. HTTPS is secure. Telnet is insecure. SFTP is secure. SNMP v1 is insecure. And IPsec is secure. If you're not familiar with some of these protocols, or you maybe didn't recognize one of the protocols, you can go to my video section 4.5 of my N10-007 course. In a video called Device Hardening, there's a section in there that goes through all of the protocols and why they're secure or why they may be insecure. You can find that right on my website for all of those. Now that we've gone through a performance-based question, and that wasn't so bad. We weren't put at a command prompt. We weren't asked to perform a function at a command prompt. Maybe I'll do that next month, because we probably should do one of those. You might get one of those on the exam. So maybe I'll try one of those next month. But let's shift gears back to instead of performance-based, let's do multiple choice-based questions. I think those would be good to do. And I have a multiple choice-based question for you next that asks, a security engineer needs to authenticate users connecting to the corporate VPN concentrator. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this authentication? Would it be IPsec, UTM, VoIP, Radius, or SSL? A security engineer needs to authenticate users connecting to the corporate VPN concentrator. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this authentication? Would it be IPsec, UTM, VoIP, Radius, or SSL? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Remember, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We're going to pretend we are sitting there in the exam ready to go. Are there command prompts in the Network Plus exam? There certainly could be. That performance-based question area that you get at the very beginning can absolutely be a command prompt. They could ask you anything in any way. And command prompts are certainly, there's plenty of command lines you need to know in Network Plus. So that's what I would recommend you do as well, is absolutely go through the process of understanding all of those command prompts and break them down and understand what they might be. So that would be very useful. So make sure you're familiar with that. I also remind everybody that if you have taken any of your exams, you don't want to violate your candidate agreement by mentioning anything that happened to be on your exam either. That's an important one too. What kind of things would you recommend we just commit to memory versus think critically about? You don't get a lot of trivia questions on these exams. You don't get a lot of questions asking you, what does the acronym SSH stand for? You'll never get a question like that. If you have a flash card right now that has SSH on one side and Secure Shell on the other, just throw that out. You won't need that. You need to know what that is. You need to know what it does. You need to have an understanding. So when I ask you of authenticating VPN and I give you a list of acronyms, knowing what the name of the acronyms are, that doesn't really help you. We have a big list that's right here. IPsec, UTM, VoIP, Radius, and SSL. All of these are acronyms. And if you happen to know what the acronyms were, that doesn't actually answer this question. Kind of a pain to step through that process. Let's see how you did, though, with this one. Let's see how you chose. We're a little torn, but we do have a majority. 54% of you said, I would use Radius. 30% now said, I would use IPsec. We have 14% said SSL, 2% said UTM, and 2% said VoIP. So this is a case where we have to really understand the technology. We need to authenticate users connecting to the corporate VPN concentrator. So this is very clear what we wanted to do with this one. We wanted to get an understanding that this is an authentication process. This is, of course, we have authentication is different than confidentiality. Authentication is different than encryption. So we have to keep that in mind as we're breaking down the different pieces of this. So knowing what we know about authentication, which one of these protocols is the most common one that you would use for authentication? And the one that we would use is the one called Radius. The remote authentication, it's even in the name, remote authentication dial-in user service. Although dial-in is not really what we use Radius for much any longer, but when we made Radius, that's what we made it for. When all there was dial-in, when all there was pretty much all there was dial-in, and a huge part of what we were doing was dial-in. But now Radius can be used for anything. It can be used to authenticate to Active Directory. It can be used to authenticate to an LDAP database. It can be used to authenticate to practically anything. It is one of the most widely used authentication protocols that you'll run into, primarily because it's so open, it's been around for so long, so many devices talk or understand Radius, so why wouldn't you use it to be able to have this here? There's a lot of competing type of protocols that do different things. Cisco has their TACX protocol. That's a comparable type of protocol to Radius. Some people just simply do LDAP lookups. That can certainly be done if your LDAP database has authentication information in it. Some people might use Kerberos, especially if you have Microsoft type environment, you'd like to use some of the advanced capabilities of Kerberos. But sometimes you just want to do a check. Somebody connects to a VPN. You just need to see if they have the right username and password. This is an exceptionally easy way to do it, is with Radius. It's available in practically anything. There's free versions of it that are literally called Free Radius, that you can install and have a Radius server up and running instantly on your network. So if you ever wanted to play around with Radius, that's a great way to do it. So we've got some other options here. 30% of you said IPsec. IPsec does have authentication functionality inside of it between the two ends of the tunnel, but that's certainly not a very common way to authenticate to a corporate VPN. In fact, many corporate VPN concentrators are not using IPsec. They're using SSL most commonly for that end user connectivity. And so the authentication in IPsec does not have that same functionality of going to a centralized database. Usually it's a separate step you would have to implement with your IPsec tunnel. So it doesn't quite fit into the model of IPsec. We also have 13% of you that said SSL. SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, that is an encryption technology. Does not provide authentication functionality inside of it. We have VoIP, voice over IP, is a way to communicate using the network, communicate using your phone across the network. And that's not an authentication protocol either. That's a way to communicate with voice and or video and or other methods over your network. And then UTM, the Unified Threat Management front end. Usually you talk about a firewall that does everything. That's a UTM. In fact, many people have a firewall router wireless switch at home. Technically, I think we could call that a UTM as well, to have those things there. UTM, obviously 1% said that. UTM does not provide authentication for those either. To have those, the only option really here that fits with authentication is Radius. So if you answered D, Radius, you got that one absolutely correct. I know we still say SSL. People in the chat room making a point that SSL has been deprecated. We no longer use SSL. You are correct. You are correct, chat room. SSL has been deprecated. However, humans haven't figured this out yet. And quite honestly, TLS is much harder to say than SSL. SSL is so easy to say. And so we continue to say SSL, even though we absolutely mean TLS. Nobody should be using SSL any longer. You should be using TLS. You probably are using TLS. When you look at HTTPS, it's using TLS. All these other technologies are using TLS. What do we call it? SSL. Why do we do that? Because we're human. And it's not the only thing we do that way in our industry, but that's one of those that you do run into. If you answer D radius, 54% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's do another one. This next multiple choice-based question asks, here we go. If I punch it up right, which of the following would be the best way to provide redundant paths at the Ethernet connection on a database server? Which of the following would be the best way to provide redundant paths at the Ethernet connection on a database server? Would that be MIMO, IaaS, OSPF, NIC teaming, or SNMP? Got quite a bit there. It's MIMO, IaaS, OSPF, NIC teaming, and SNMP. Those are your 5 options for finding the best way to provide redundant paths at the Ethernet connection on a database server. If you think you know your answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. So as TLS and SSL in the same layer, they're so common. They effectively took SSL and created a new flavor of it and called it TLS. They are practically the same thing but a newer version. But they don't although they don't interoperate for very good reasons. It's just effectively we upgraded it, but it wasn't enough to upgrade it. We had to give it a new name. And there was actually some good reasons we had to give it a new name. And the people that took over the functionality of it or creation of it needed to give it a new name to designate it as something that was very different. This goes back a while, though. These days we wonder why we did that. But back then it was very important that we are really able to tell that are we using SSL or TLS. And if you talk to your network or security administrator, they know which one they're using. They just colloquially call it SSL very commonly. Some people will call it TLS just to make sure you understand that is what they're using, especially if they're trying to designate a certain version of TLS to you to be able to have that there. What does Netscape Navigator use? I guess the question there is twofold, isn't it? Have to figure out what that is. Let's see how you answer this question. Which of the following would be the best way to provide redundant paths at the Ethernet connection on a database server? Is it MIMO, IaaS, OSPF, NIC teaming, or SNMP? How did we do? 62% of you think it's NIC teaming. 14% said MIMO, which is tied for 14% said OSPF. Only 8% said SNMP. Only 2% said IaaS. So I guess if we go with the large number of people that say, well, we'll say NIC teaming, I think that's a pretty good answer, NIC teaming. You may see this called something like load balancing failover, LBFO. NIC teaming is probably, again, the more common term you would use. Hey, you doing NIC teaming on that server? Okay, good. We'll get you a couple connections for the NIC teaming to have that set up there. That's when you have multiple network adapters in a server, and what you're really most worried about is one of those adapters failing to have that there. Whenever you start worrying or trying to figure out at what point does this server no longer be available, you kind of have to work back. Do we need 2 switches? Do we need 2 routers beyond that? Do we need 2 firewalls? Do we need 2 network connections going out of the building? Do those 2 network connections need to go to different internet service providers? These are the questions that are legitimate, that many organizations will set up their network that way, and they'll go all the way back to the server and say, you know what, let's put 2 network interface cards in it. That way, if a network interface card fails, because that does happen, it's rare, but it does happen that a network interface card just fails, then we'd have another one that keeps traffic going. Or what if the connection that one of those interface cards is connected to, one of the switches it's connected to, fails? Now we have another path out of our server to be able to get connections there. Now, can this be used for load balancing? It could be. You could have the load split between those 2, and as soon as one of those fails, now the entire load's going to go to the other one. The interface cards will talk to each other constantly, so they'll know if you lose a connection, if one of those cards goes away, suddenly you're not hearing from the card anymore. I'm going to take over. I'm going to be the primary connection to be able to have that there. That NIC teaming can come in pretty handy, and if you're someone who wants to have redundant paths at the server itself coming out of the network interface card, then that's a great way to do it. NIC teaming is the right answer. We have other answers here like MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, is a wireless technology that is able to send to multiple paths at the same time over the same frequency, which is a little bit different than what we were talking about at the Ethernet card. MIMO is a wireless technology, so it would not be used at your Ethernet connection. OSPF is a routing protocol. We don't use routing protocols on servers. We use them on routers. And although OSPF does have functionality that allows you to have multiple paths and different ways to provide redundancy. OSPF is not what you would be used at the Ethernet connection on a database server. SNMP, as we've already mentioned, is the simple network management protocol that's not used for redundant pathing. And infrastructure as a service is a model used in cloud computing. It is not one that would be used at the database server for redundant paths, to have that there. Now, NIC teaming is a very common method to have multiple connections, usually going different places. Some people in the chat room going, what about link aggregation, or using things like the LACP protocol to provide link aggregation? LACP is the link aggregation control protocol. Well, LACP is not link aggregation. LACP is a protocol that allows you to have link aggregation. And link aggregation is a different thing. Link aggregation is when you have multiple interface cards all effectively going exactly to the same place on the other side so that you can increase the overall bandwidth there. So instead of having 1 gigabit connection, you might have 4 gigabit connections, and now you've increased the amount of bandwidth available fourfold. Now, the problem you have is if all 4 of those are going to a switch and you lose that switch, you've now lost the connection. You don't have the redundancy there unless you planned it that way to begin with. So it becomes a little bit different. Your link aggregation could provide some redundant paths, but as you see in this answer, I did not give you the option of link aggregation. The only option here that's available that fits the requirements of redundant paths at the Ethernet connection on a database server is answer D, NIC teaming. Everybody who answered D, the 63% of you got that one absolutely correct, to have that there. So if you want more information on that, NIC teaming is available on section 3.2 of the N10-007 in my video called Availability Concepts. I've got other pictures and diagrams and setups that show you a little bit more about that as well on that video. Well, we've already gone through just a few questions, and as you can see on the Network Plus exam, tons of information that you need to know about encryption and fiber connections and console connections and topologies and load balancing and link aggregation and all these things network related. So when you get into that scenario where you're suddenly overwhelmed, and as people have mentioned in the chat room already, there is a ton of acronyms on this exam. How are you supposed to keep in mind what all these acronyms mean, or even better, how these acronyms are actually used? Well, what I've done is go through every single one of my Network Plus videos. There are 101 Network Plus videos that I've created for this. That's a lot of videos, over 12 hours of content. Not everybody gets to go through every single one of those videos and watch every single one of them. So what I did was create a set of course notes. These are course notes that you can get in either PDF format, which is what I have in front of me, or you can get them in a physical format, which I also have in front of me. There's an actual book form of the course notes available. It's the same information. It's just in a bound, color, high quality, high stock paper version of this. And the course notes go through everything: port numbers, topologies, trunking, the cable diagrams. There's so much in here. I put every single diagram I created, every single picture I created, because all of the diagrams and all of the pictures and all of the tables from my videos I created. So I took all the text, all the graphics, all the charts, everything, I stuck them in these books. So that way, when you're finished going through the videos, you're finished going through your book, you've done some hands-on, and you really want to know, have I studied everything listed in the CompTIA exam objectives? This is how you know, because you've gone through now my course notes, and everything from the exam objectives is on here, video by video by video. And since I use the exam objectives to make my videos, I know that I've covered every topic. If you'd like to learn more about this and see what we have available for Network Plus, it also helps, every dollar of this helps keep the site going. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/NPCN. That stands for Network Plus Course Notes. You can also find links from the main page of the Professor Messer website. Thank you for your ongoing support, and for the people that have already purchased this, thank you for your purchase and your support of the site as well. Let's do some more questions. I've got plenty to go through. We've got a question now that's more of a security question. The security question asks, an attacker has modified their MAC address to circumvent an access point filter. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be man in the middle, spoofing, phishing, VLAN hopping, or social engineering. And attackers modified their MAC address to circumvent an access point filter. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be man in the middle, spoofing, phishing, VLAN hopping, or social engineering? Do you think you know the answer? Lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. It's very important. I will say, Delta Computer Help in the chat room, that any names or references in my course to anything actual or fictionalized is purely a random occurrence. There is certainly no effort to violate anybody's trademark in there, just so we're very, very clear on that. For those of you in the chat room mentioning the course notes, thank you so much to have all of those things there. Everything available on the website. You can find it right there. Attackers modified their MAC address to circumvent an access point filter. Which of the following would best describe this attack? This is one that can be a problem for those of you that have tried to set up filters on your access point. How do you avoid that and make that happen? You'll figure it out. Get those. The notes are $20, not $200 for that. If you would like to pay $200, that's fine too. You could do that. I don't know that I would pay $200 for my notes. I would pay $20 for my notes. I think $20 is a steal, but I don't think $200 would probably work out. Or I would have priced it that way. I assure you, probably would not work out. That was probably a business 101 decision on my part, wasn't it? To try to figure out all of those things. Let's see how you did with this one. A number of you have locked in your answers. So let's see how you did. And attackers modified their MAC address, whatever that is, to circumvent an access point filter. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be? How do we do? Let's see. 83% of you say, oh yeah, that's spoofing is what you would do. And then it's such a large number, everything else is single digit. So 9% said man in the middle. Well, man in the middle made sense to me. 6% said VLAN hopping. VLAN hopping did not make sense to me. 2% said phishing, definitely not phishing. And 2% said social engineering with this. 81% is kind of a difficult number to come off of. Of course, it's going to be spoofing. Spoofing is simply a generic term that says you're pretending to be something you are not. There's a lot of ways to spoof. You walk into anywhere and you say, I am this person and I am handling this, and you're really not. You're spoofing yourself. Spoofing tends to be more of an electronic type scenario for these. Whenever you start working through any of this and trying to get a feel for these things, this is where, especially with things like caller ID, email, using a MAC address of someone else's during this, that is exactly what you would run into. Spoofing is where you find this. And that is one that does become an issue, especially if your filter is based on allowing certain MAC addresses. I'll just change my MAC address, and now I'm allowed through your filter, which is very, very common to see on something like a MAC address filter that you might see on a wireless network, for example. So that's where you run into those types of scenarios. Spoofing is the right answer here. There are other options here. Man in the middle is one where somebody, a third party, is sitting in the middle of a conversation, and neither of the people on the other ends of this conversation know that they are there. They are completely hidden. They are a ghost. And that man in the middle is in capturing and sending along everything, going back and forth, in some cases even modifying the data in between. Man in the middle is not a process where you would modify a MAC address to circumvent an access point filter, however. You also have the option of VLAN hopping. This is where you are modifying VLAN configurations, especially that are going across a trunked connection. That is well outside the scope of the question that was asked, which was simply modifying a MAC address. So it would not be VLAN hopping. We have phishing, which is a way that people try to social engineer some confidential information out of you. They try to get you to give them your credit card number or your bank account information, or even some private information about you in that phishing exercise. Just like somebody who's using a fishing pole and trying to get a bite. That's what they're doing with that phishing, except it's a PH phishing. And then social engineering, a more broad term that is really about somebody trying to get information out of you or trying to make you do something that perhaps you probably shouldn't be doing. They are doing this on the sly. They are someone who is not or should not be allowed to have that particular thing happen. So social engineering, also a common security concern, but does not fit the scenario of modifying a MAC address. In this case, spoofing is the right answer. 81% of you got that one absolutely correct. We got time for some more, so I think we should go through some more. I've got another multiple choice based question. This is more of a hardcore networking question for you folks. This one asks, the delivery of equipment into a wiring closet has pulled some of the Ethernet cables from a 110 block. Which of the following would be the best way to repair this problem? Would it be a punch-down tool, an inductive probe, a TDR, a loopback plug, or a tone generator? The delivery of equipment into a wiring closet has pulled some Ethernet cables from a 110 block. You should watch what you're doing. Which of the following would be the best way to repair this problem? Would it be a punch-down tool, an inductive probe, a TDR, a loopback plug, or a tone generator? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Remember, as a reminder, no answers in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we are there working on this ourselves, trying to figure out all the details. Whenever you start working in the room, you should probably have prevented them from even bringing all of these things into the room to start with. So that might have been the first step for you, is to absolutely prevent somebody from bringing a box into the room with all the cables. But too late for that. They already did it. So you have to go through and now find some way to repair this problem. This would be a great way to do it. Try to figure out those details. Lock in your answer, professormesser.com/QA. You might have even had to do this. I had to do this recently, not because I pulled some of the Ethernet cables from a 110 block, but I have a 110 block I wanted to add some additional connections to. I have a 110 block in my data center, which is a closet that's right there. It's my data center. And I had to use one of those things to be able to add those to the block. That's probably the only hint I can really give you for this one. A lot of you are trying to figure this one out. Not a lot of people jumping into this one. So it'll be interesting to see what the answers are. I get to see the number of answers and see how quickly they rotate through and figuring out all of those things. Whenever you start working with cable, I will tell you, this is one where getting a good knowledge of cabling can really help you whenever you're working through these scenarios, whenever you're working in networking, because there may be times when you need to build out your own serial cable, where you need to build out an Ethernet cable of a specific size, or where you need to repair a problem like this. Being familiar at the cable level is a different set of skills than understanding routing and switching. And it's some very valuable skills. So don't forget about your cabling skills. They're almost as valuable in some cases. Having a very good layer one is a pretty important thing. Let's see how you did with this one. The delivery of equipment into a wiring closet has pulled some of the Ethernet cables from a 110 block. Which of the following would be the best way to repair this problem? 79% of you said a punch-down tool. But is that really the right answer? We'll find out in a moment. We have 8% said tone generator. We got 8% said loopback plug, 4% said a TDR, and 2% said an inductive probe. All 5 of these things, by the way, are important tools to have in your toolbox. You should have these in your belt all the time because they can always come in handy to have this. But when you're working on a 110 block, when you're working on a 66 block, when you're working on any type of block, then you're working on something that needs to be punched down. And so you need not just a punch down tool, but you need the right punch down tool. There are usually a set of connectors that go into the punch down block that are labeled. And they will tell you if you're on a 110 block, it has on it 110. Make sure you plug in the right one and lock it in if you're going to use these. This is not a fun thing to do. In fact, if you got a lot of wires that need to be punched down, this is horribly tedious. But you usually would get them all ready to go. You line them all up, and then you can always tell when the guy's ready to go. You hear punch down, chunk, chunk, chunk. He just keeps going down, getting them all down. It cuts it off. There's pieces of wire everywhere. And make sure you vacuum up when you're done. It's just a mess because the wires go all over the place. but incredibly useful, especially when you've got some punch down blocks. You've got all these new connections coming off of a floor. You've built out a new training room. You pull all of those wires into the punch down block, and now they're permanently fastened to this. The only thing you would ever have to do is change the wiring in your wiring closet or wherever you happen to have your switches. Makes it so easy to have that middle spot that is the punch down block. It simplifies things so much easier to have those things there. And it makes it so simple. You know that wire going to that desk is never going to move. And that is so important when you start getting into networking, more than you realize. And when it's just your connection on your laptop, that's no big deal. All right, what if you have 1,000 of those? So now this cable management becomes so important. That's why these punch down blocks and these patch panels exist, because it becomes so important to not move a cable. Once it's there, it is there forever, quote unquote. Makes it so much easier. That's one less thing now you have to worry about troubleshooting, because you know once that wire is in place and you have tested it, and you've qualified it as being able to support the speeds that it needs, now you're good to go. There's not much that can go wrong with that connection. In this case, punch down block is the right answer. 79% of you did choose punch down block. Now, if this was a case where you did not know where the ends of the cable were, one DIMM was in the out on the floor somewhere at a person's desk, and you had to find the other end of that cable in the wiring closet, you would use an inductive probe and a tone generator. You put a tone generator on it at one end of the wire, and then you would use the inductive probe to find the other end of the wire. That becomes very useful. Does not help you put those wires into a 110 block, however. Another option here is a TDR, time domain reflectometer. Very commonly used to do that qualification I just mentioned. Does this wire work properly? Is it wired properly? And now that we've run it, how much crosstalk are we getting on this connection? Can it support a gigabit connection? Can it support 10 gig over this wire? The only way you'd be able to know is if you qualified it, you tested it in some way, and you would use a time domain reflectometer to perform those types of tests. And then lastly, a loopback plug. Very, very rarely you would use this, but if you are ever wondering if a particular interface on a device is working properly, then there's going to be a diagnostic process that will require you to plug in a loopback plug so that it will send out a signal and then receive that same signal, loop it back into itself, and then it evaluates, did I receive the same thing I happen to transmit? That can help me qualify whether the physical connection on that device is working properly or not. So that is the answers. The only one that fits best here to be able to plug these cables back into the 110 block is your punch down tool. That's what you need. If you don't have a good punch down tool, make sure you get one to work on your 110 blocks. And let's do another. We got time for a couple more questions, I think. So let's see if we can get some more here. Here's a question. This one came up earlier this week, so I thought I would put this one into the list of the different things available. The next question asks, which of the following would be the best way to separate two network subnets on the same physical switch? Which of the following would be the best way to separate two network subnets on the same physical switch? Would it be a trunk? Would it be an IPsec tunnel? Would it be a VLAN? Would it be STP? Or would it be a load balancer? Which of the following would be the best way to separate two network subnets on the same physical switch? A trunk, an IPsec tunnel, a VLAN, STP, or a load balancer? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to answer by going to professormester.com/QA and lock it in. Now, obviously, if you're watching this on the replay, then you won't be able to lock anything in. The questions won't be there, but you can still follow along with the video as we're going through this. In your mind, you can lock in what you think it was, and we'll know in just a moment what it happened to be. We'll figure out the details as we go through it. Trust me, we'll be able to know exactly what those answers might be. Now, if you ever work through these and you're trying to figure out how do I do this on the switch? How do I break this down on the switch? How do we segment and separate and do all of these things? It becomes an important part of what we are doing with our networking. It's almost a core part of what we're doing with our networking. And if you have some switches at home that are not a generic switch that you might buy off of a Best Buy, then, and you have maybe an older Cisco switch you're working with, you can perform some of these functions. So that may be useful to have there too. So make sure you break those down, figure out the details. Which of the following would be the best way to separate two network subnets on the same physical switch? Would it be a trunk, an IPsec tunnel, a VLAN, STP, or a load balancer? And 83% again, you said VLAN is the right answer. So hopefully that gives you some perspective as what people are thinking with segmentation. But if we look at this, trunking is a great way to provide segmentation between switches. We have other things in here that we could use, but the question was about separating two network subnets on the same physical switch. Well, we could do this, of course, with separate switches. In fact, this is how we used to do it with hubs, is we would have two separate devices. This is, if you're in a very high secure environment, this is how you would do it. You would have one switch. In fact, this one switch has, what does it have, 24 ports on it, and there's two devices on it. And this is what we call the single broadcast domain on this particular network, these two single devices, where we're wasting another 22 ports on this particular switch. Same scenario over here. We have another switch we purchased. We're paying maintenance on every year. We have to support and make sure it has the latest upgraded code on it. It's using power. So we have a completely separate switch with two devices on it. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could use a single switch to do this, but still maintain the same logical separation that we have in this physical separation form? And the way that we do that is with virtual LANs. So this would be considered a local area network. We can put this all on a single switch, though, and we can assign on the switch itself, you are on VLAN 1, you are on VLAN 2. And when you create that segmentation in the switch, none of these devices know the others are there. You're effectively creating a virtual world that they can live in, where the red side of the network has no clue that the blue side exists, and vice versa. There's no way to connect those together and have those capabilities there. So now we've really got some benefits from this. First off, we're not wasting, we don't have to buy a new switch. We only have a single switch. We're not wasting power. We only have to maintain one device. And we also now have everything in one single place, which also helps with the cabling and other things as well. Very, very useful to have that functionality there. VLAN literally is virtual local area networks, and we still have that same separation between those two. Now, this is when you start getting into how to segment the network and keep things secure. This becomes pretty important to have those things there. So hopefully that can give you some perspective on how you might configure your network to separate things logically on a single switch rather than physically onto separate physical devices. This is 83% of you said VLANs. You're absolutely right. Trunking is obviously an important part of VLANs. Trunking is a way that you can extend those VLANs to other switches in your environment. We obviously have a limited number of interfaces here. What happens when you fill up all of those interfaces? I need another switch. But now how do I extend the red VLAN and the blue VLAN to another switch? I can send those still separated, still logically separated, but I extend them by using trunks between those switches. And I have a section in the videos that describes trunking and how that works. IPsec tunnels are used to create a generally encrypted communication between two devices. That would not be the way to separate network subnets on the same physical switch. We would say STP, the spanning tree protocol. I guess it could be the shielded twisted pair, but in this case, it's the spanning tree protocols where I was going with that. Neither one of them would be the right answer. Neither one of them is used to separate two network subnets on the same physical switch. And then load balancer. Well, we've already talked a little bit about load balancing already today. Load balancing, a way to have multiple connections and spread the load across those multiple connections. The load balancer is not a way to separate two network subnets in the same physical switch. Load balancers usually are connecting to devices that are on the same subnet. In fact, they're effectively all doing the same thing, and we're simply load balancing between all of them. So the right answer and the only answer available here, VLAN is it, your virtual local area network. That's what you would use. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would be glad to send you an email stating that you watched this for 1 hour of a CompTIA CEU for the webinar category. Obviously, there's only a limited number of those that you could use in a renewal period, but I'm glad to give you however many you might need. The way that you would do that is to follow these instructions. Make sure you follow them exactly, or you will not receive your CEU. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. On that Contact Us link, put in your name, put in your email address. That's an important part because I'm emailing these back to you. In the subject line, please put that this is the June 2020 Network Plus Study Group. And on a single line by itself in the body, put the super secret code word of the month, load balancer. How's that for a twist? Load balancer is the super secret code word of the month. Put that. You can also make sure it's on a line by itself. And then if you want to put anything else in the body of the message, you're welcome to. I read through every single one of them. I'm not able to respond back to all of them because I get so many. But just to let you know, I do read through every single one that you do send me. So do that. Make sure you follow those instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click Contact Us. You put in your name, your email address. Put in the subject line, this is the June 2020 Network Plus Study Group. Put on a line by itself the super secret code word of the month, load balancer, and then send it on to me. Usually takes me about a week to rotate these things through. So I've had people send it, and then 10 minutes later, they send another one. And then 10 minutes later, they send another one, wondering, why is it not getting back to them quickly? Because I do it manually. That's why. It's not an automated process. So you'll end up getting 3 duplicates, which don't help you either. You can only really use one of those. So if you're not getting a response and you're wondering, what are you doing? Why are you taking so long? You're certainly welcome to ask. You can send me a note saying, especially if you're short of time, maybe you're coming up for renewal tomorrow and this is the last thing you need. That does happen. Just send me a note saying, this is short of time. Please get this turned around for me immediately, and I'll send it right back to you. No problem. Everything else usually takes about a week. I usually sit down the weekend and do that. So that will get you there. Well, I think we got time for another question. I know it's top of the hour. We're going to squeeze another one in. Let's do another one. And let's work through this one. This question, since we're on cabling and fiber and everything else, here's one question that asks, which of these would be the best way to manage fiber links between buildings on a campus? Which of these would be the best way to manage fiber links between buildings on a campus? Would it be 110 blocks? Would it be distribution panels? Would it be ground plates? Would it be CSU, DSUs? Or would it be DMARCs? Which of these would be the best way to manage fiber links between buildings on a campus? Would it be 110 blocks, distribution panels, ground plates, CSU, DSUs, or DMARCs? If you think you know the answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. See what it happens to be. For those of you in the chat room saying, I'm just going to take a guess at this one, I'm not sure, that is exactly what you should be doing. We know on the exam that if you answer a question wrong, they don't take points away from you, which means you can absolutely answer a question with no fear. You can just take a guess. The worst thing that could happen is you get it wrong, you get no points. The best thing that can happen is you happen to choose the right answer, which is really the right answer. That's the best thing you could possibly do. Choose the right answer, and then you get points for free. You didn't even know it, and you guessed right. That's what you should do. Never leave a question blank on your exam. Never submit your exam and not having answered every single one of these. Make sure you're familiar. That's a very important, that's listed in my exam hacks ebook. I gave you one for free there. So that's obviously one you should always have. Never leave a question on the exam blank or unanswered. You should always have an answer in there. If you got a minute left, make them all A. Or if you can take an educated guess, try to take an educated guess at those. Figure out the details. Okay. Do wrong answers provide negative points? They do not. So they once you earn the points, they don't take them away. So that's why I mentioned that. There's no negatives for taking a guess and answering wrong. They will not take those points away from you once you have earned them. So of course you would take a stab at this. There's no downside. Of course we would do that to have those there. Let's see how you did with this one. For this, which of these would be the best way to manage fiber links between buildings on a campus? Would it be 110 blocks, distribution panels, ground plates, CSU, DSUs, or DMARCs? All 5 of these things are real things, by the way, we want to focus on. 51%, if we go with the majority, just a bare majority, barely got there. Distribution panels is what you would use. 23% of you said you'd use CSU DSUs. 17% said you would use a DMARC. 5% said a ground plate, and 4% said 110 blocks. Now, for those of you, this is not just a campus that is a college campus we're referring to. This can be a campus that is a corporate campus where there are multiple buildings on the campus. And when it is a corporate campus, or when it is an area either owned by a single entity or owned by a private entity, there's usually conduit in between all the buildings. And very commonly, that conduit, you would pull fiber between the buildings, because that is one of the best ways to send the traffic from end to end without having to worry about any type of interference or grounding problem. We just pull some fiber and connect them on both sides. Now, you can imagine if you got 10 buildings and all the buildings are kind of all coming back to one central point, this can be a little bit of a hassle to manage all these crazy fibers that are everywhere. You need some way to manage that type of connectivity, and you would use a fiber distribution panel to do this. This is a very common way to do it. You got all these fibers that are coming in. Remember, with fiber, you can't just make a 90-degree angle. It needs to be a curved connection. So it comes out of this fiber panel, and then, in fact, it comes in and circles around and circles around and circles around and eventually plugs into a patch that is here where you can extend the fiber connection to have it there. So very, very easy to have that functionality there. This means you're not going to extend the bend radius of the fiber where you're bending it too far. And they usually put a little extra fiber in there just in case something was to happen, or you need to extend or have additional fiber there to have those there. In fact, this is a good example where some of the fiber is plugged in and there's nothing plugged into the other side of it. So maybe that's waiting in case you ever need to use that someday. That way you run it one time. You wouldn't just run one pair. You'd run a bunch of pair at the same time. If you're running it through the conduit, there guys are already out there running it. Why wouldn't you run multiples of those? Are the fiber cables always yellow? There is a standard, I'll say quote unquote standard. I'm not sure if it's an ANSI standard or an ISO standard for the color of cabling, but there is a common coloring for orange for multi-mode of a certain type, yellow for single mode of a certain type. But it's not a standard. It is something you commonly see, however. There are some manufacturers that do standardize on some of those colors. So the idea is you should be able to look at that fiber and go, oh, that's a multi-mode this size. You'd be able to look at it. It does not necessarily mean that. That could be a single mode or multi-mode even though it's yellow, that tells me it's single mode, but it could be multi-mode because the color doesn't matter. We try to in the industry at least try to get it that way. Fiber distribution panel is the right answer. 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. A CSU DSU, channel service unit, data service unit, those are devices that are effectively tools to translate between two different network types. We very commonly see them on wide area network connections where the wide area network provider is bringing in a T1 or T3 line, for example, and that's talking the T1 or T3 protocols, the language of that wide area network connection. But your router that's on the other side doesn't talk T1 or T3, it talks serial. So you need some way to convert it from a T1 language to a serial language, and a CSU DSU is what does that. Sometimes a CSU DSU is an external unit. Sometimes it's integrated into your router. Interestingly enough, if you have a cable modem at your house, that is effectively a CSU DSU. It's taking the digital signals off of the cable and it's converting those into Ethernet digital signals. So we always call it a cable modem because everybody knows what a modem is. From a consumer perspective, cable modem sounds nice. Could you imagine if everybody at home had to get their cable CSU DSU? That's just not good marketing. It's a cable modem. We're fine with that. Effectively, a CSU DSU is kind of modem anyway, even though it's not modulating, demodulating, because that infers that it's going out over an analog type connection. It's digital to digital, so it really is CSU DSU. 17% said a DMARC. A DMARC is a physical place that has been designated as the demarcation point. Usually that's where your wide area network provider plugs in the box on your side that you would then connect your CSU DSU to. You need some point that's sort of the midpoint where you can say everything on this side of the line is the wide area network provider's problem. Everything on this side of the line is my problem. That is our line in the sand. That is our demarcation point, or our DMARC. Ground plates are usually copper plates you would use to to have a electrical ground. Usually would connect that electrical ground to your electrical equipment. Very often your racks that you would have in a data center would connect to large ground plates, which then are connected to an electrical ground that physically goes into the ground that is outside your building. And then we've already talked about 110 blocks. That's kind of a gimme. Only 4% said that. 110 blocks is where we use our punch down tool and plug in those Ethernet cables or any other type of twisted pair or non-twisted pair wire for that matter into those blocks to be able to connect up and have a midpoint where we connect two devices together. Patch panels and those types of things commonly use those 110 blocks. The only option here that makes any sense whatsoever are the distribution panels. And once you see it, you see that, yeah, that does make sense to me. It's exactly what we would use for that is the distribution blocks. And 51% of you got that one absolutely right. No problems with that question. Well, all the questions we talked about today come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you do not have these objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice. They should be the first thing you download. You should have this list in front of you all the time. This should be your checklist during your studies. And before you go into your exam, it's a great final checklist. It is an extensive list of everything you need to know for the exam. And I mention this also because you should take advantage of this. Microsoft doesn't do this for you. Cisco doesn't do this for you. VMware doesn't do this for you. Nobody else does this. Nobody else provides this level of detail about what is expected of you on the exam. So folks in the chat room have already mentioned, what do I need to know before walking into my exam? You need to know everything on this list because they could ask you from anything listed there. It's a great sanity check too. Before you walk into the exam, you'll know, do I know everything I need to know? Or do I not? And it's free. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives will link you right over to the CompTIA website, or you can simply go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives, will take you right to it. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. We also do 2 A+ study groups and a Security Plus study group every month. Our Security Plus study group is a week from today. Come back for that one if you're interested. If you're ever wondering when the next event is going to be, you can go to the Professor Messer website on professormesser.com/calendar or use the calendar link at the top of the page. Our next Network Plus study group next month, about this time on July the 15th, to be able to have those things there. Well, we've gotten through the first hour of me asking you questions, but we're not really done yet. We have an after show where I open up the phone lines. I'll take questions from the chat room. We can talk about what you're doing these days while you're either at home or finally letting you out of the house. Don't forget about my Network Plus Success Bundle and my course notes. You can find them both at professormesser.com/netsuccess, N-E-T success. Don't forget about the weekly pop quiz question on the YouTube, on the Twitter, on the Instagram. I've also got pop quiz questions, my Take 10 challenge on my website. Those are relatively new, where I have Network Plus questions for the N10-007, these 10 question challenge sets that you can take on my website at professormesser.com/take10. And then you, of course, got the Amazon link for you Amazon purchasers. Don't forget about visiting our website first, professormesser.com/Amazon. Stick around. We'll have more to come where you're going to ask me questions, and I'll answer almost anything you would like. And we can, of course, do more. We'd love to have you here next month as well. Come on back, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone. Let's get things going now. I'll click some buttons on my side. I'll take questions from the chat room. So if you're in the chat room, this is the one that is on the YouTube right now. I'll also take questions on our phone lines, which I'm going to start up if you will bear with me a moment, because I need to call into my own phone lines, which is how this works. It's all in the cloud. And then you will call into the cloud, and then we will both talk to each other in the cloud. So first I will start up the show on my side, and then I will physically call in to my own show. So I'm going to pull up my Skype and do that as you patiently sit there. Thank you for your indulgence. This just takes a moment while it calls in and it answers and it says, welcome, thank you, and do this. And then I use my new mouse, which is now working. And I type in all of those numbers it forces you to type in to be able to connect in. And it says, welcome, which means you are welcome as well to call in to this show if you'd like to. I'll also take questions from the chat room if you would like to call in. Anywhere in the continental United States, it's 855-785-RJ45. That's a toll-free number. West of the Rockies, you can call 855-785-7545. We've also got a way that you can call in for free anywhere in the world. You simply use Skype, because Skype will be able to call in on a toll-free number with no Skype minutes. You simply put a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545, and you can, of course, get there. What mouse do I have? Well, it's the same mouse I had before. The left button went out on it. Look at the size of this mouse. It's huge. You're supposed to fit your whole hand on it. So it literally is one that holds my entire hand. You can see that on the top of it. It is so comfortable because I've got these big hands. I'm glad it did not turn out to be a brain surgeon. It's enormous. So this is literally called a hand shoe mouse. Literally a hand shoe mouse. That's the name of it. It's made by, I don't know. It's down there somewhere. I have the box. I threw it down there. The hand shoe mouse is what's there. I got the new Logitech, relatively new in the last year, the new Logitech Ergo mouse. And it was just too high. It sits up, your hand sits on it, and you kind of do it sideways, which is fine. It's kind of small for my hand, but it's so tall that when you move to type, you knock it over. It falls over. So that wasn't a good mouse to use. I gave it a shot. For those of you kind of keeping up with the studio, it's a new Logitech keyboard, though. It's their new Ergo keyboard, which I got to tell you, this may be the replacement for the Microsoft Ergo keyboard. The keys are just so awesome. It's a great way to do it. And so that's where that goes. It is a wired mouse. Yes, the hand shoe is let's see, get a better shot of it here. Hand shoe is a wired mouse. I know that looks like it's huge because it is. It's a big, it's designed to be. So your whole hand just rides on top of it. So comfortable. And since I'm here most of the time, this is where I'm sitting. It's nice to have something that is there to be able to do this and have those things there. From the chat room, what is the best platform/way to support you? Well, just watch the videos. Every video of every course I make is absolutely free. Watch the videos. That's a great way to support us. If you are on YouTube, you can subscribe. Another great way to support what we do. If you are studying for exams and you need some additional materials like course notes or audio or video, you can purchase those from us as well to support us. I try to make it different ways to do that because watching the video is great. It's a great way to support what we do. But you don't have to just stop there. If you'd like to get the course notes, I want to have it so that you get something if you spend money. So you'll notice I don't take donations. That's just not my gig. I prefer that you get something for your cash. So that's what's there. Yeah, it's kind of weird. This looks like it's very, very dark. And in the rest of the studio it is. But right above me and to the sides are some LED lights that are shining right on me. So although you look at this and you think he's in a really dark room, I am, because there is stuff out here on the rest of this room, but the rest of it, all the lights are shining this way, which is why it's just like being in a theater, in a play, where you notice you and the audience are in the dark, but up there on the stage you can see everything. It's what it is. It just looks kind of weird when I shift back and forth. I need one more angle, don't I? Which is kind of way back there somewhere, so you get a better perspective of that. Do I post my questions on Twitter as well as YouTube? All of my questions, my daily and weekly pop quiz questions are posted on Twitter, on Instagram, and through an email subscription that you could subscribe to on my website from the main page to have those there. Yes, a great way to do that as well. Support what we do. Let's go to the phone lines where persons on the phone line has been waiting patiently. Let's go to the 602 area code. And if I click the right button, hi caller, which name are you calling from?
Hi, good afternoon. Good to chat with you, Professor.
Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm here in Maryland, and my question is. All right, let me pause the.
Yep.
I'm hearing myself here. Yeah, thank you for taking my call here. My first question is, if I understand that it depends on the local market of what they're looking for, that it's a three-pronged approach, meaning education, experience, and certifications. Now, speaking of certifications, if would it be better to focus on CompTIA Cloud certification or be more focused on Azure or AWS?
I think you had it right at the beginning when you mentioned that it depends on where you are, where you're geographically located. You mentioned that you were in Maryland, and in Maryland, there's a huge emphasis in the federal government, especially in Department of Defense. And a lot of the federal government loves for you to have a Security Plus certification. So there's an example. A lot of people that come to my site get their Security Plus as their first and maybe their only certification, because that's what employers in their area are looking for. Now, there may be a similar thing, though, with cloud certifications. The two that you chose, in fact, I would say any cloud certification right now is a valuable certification to have, not just for your knowledge of how that particular manufacturer implements their cloud configuration, but just having a familiarity with how these systems work in general. And you have these scenarios where, although I'm not sure where this ended up, there was that big fight between, was it Amazon and Microsoft with the cloud computing for the federal government? So these arguments are going back and forth right now over what cloud provider do we use. And AWS certifications are fantastic. Azure certifications, you really can't go wrong with a Microsoft certification. But it does come down to what employers in your area are looking for. I would say with cloud certifications, though, I would imagine most geographies are many and varied along cloud certifications. It's not like a lot of places are locked in like the federal government is with Security Plus. Cloud tends to be a little broader in that perspective. And it seems to be, and as you've seen with Microsoft certifications, they're not emphasizing the operating system so much any longer. Getting a Microsoft server, or even, do they even have Windows 10 anymore? I think they were working on phasing that out. That everything was moving to more learn the cloud, learn the cloud, learn the cloud. And I can't say they're wrong, although they may be cutting off a little bit of potential to try to push everybody to the cloud. I think you really can't go wrong. You're trying to decide between which diamond do I get? Do I get this pretty diamond or this pretty diamond? I think those are two good choices regardless of what you choose.
Understood. Is it okay to ask another question?
Sure, yeah.
All right, thank you. So I'm planning to get my degree in this field, and obviously there are so many options. Are you going to highly suggest stick with computer science because that's the most important foundation for everything else in this field, or going into web development or cybersecurity or anything to that effect? It's still pretty much as good as that. Hopefully my question makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I've mentioned this on other study groups, but let's go through this just so you can see where things have been. So I've got one kid that just finished college with an IT degree, which are unusual to find. I have another kid in college who's getting a cloud computing degree, which is also remarkably unusual to find. And I've got another kid he's just trying to get his AA at this point. He doesn't know what he's going to do, but he probably won't be a technical degree, which is fine too. He's going to do fine whatever he chooses. My degree that I got back in the day when we were using chisels and trying to write things with crayon was a business management degree. And even today, the university I got my business management degree from, Florida State University, they don't have an IT degree. There is no such thing. In fact, most four-year universities, I would say the vast majority of four-year universities, don't have IT degrees. They have, as you mentioned, computer science degrees. And computer science has nothing to do with IT. It has maybe, in the Venn diagrams of those two bubbles of computer science and IT, maybe there's a little sliver in the middle, maybe a little bit. Not much, just a sliver of something. Getting a computer science degree does not get you on the course for IT or what I call IT security to have those things there. It doesn't help you much at all from that perspective. So whenever I start looking at where you should go in a formal degree perspective to learn about these things, if you want to do programming, if you want to learn how to write applications, if you want to build a mobile app or a Mac OS app or a Windows app or a Linux app, then computer science is a perfect example of where you should go. You're going to learn all the programming languages. You're going to learn the C++. You'll learn the Java. You'll learn how to program. But then once you're done, you're nowhere further along with the IT process than you were when you started. All it really gives you is a degree that you can show somebody, I finished my 4-year degree. But it doesn't help you at all with IT, unfortunately. IT is the other side of things. It's the making sure the applications work. It's making sure the database created by that application stores the data properly. It's making sure the network that is used for people to be able to use that application is up and running and redundant and fast. It's making sure that we have a cloud computing environment that's able to build these applications very quickly, and these instances can be torn down instantly. They can be done automatically. There's orchestration with all of these things. It is effectively a science unto itself. We don't call it IT science. It's just called information technology, but it has nothing really to do with computer science. Those two areas are separated pretty well at this point. There is some aspects, and the part that's in the middle, as I said, there's a small sliver, is probably the automation part of it. If you're in IT, you know that you do batch files, you do automation, there's scripting. So there's some automation aspect to this. I really call it scripting. I don't call it programming because it really isn't. I consider programming to be more of a life skill that takes you an entire life to learn it. Not that it's a life skill, but it's one that it's not something you just pick up and, hey, I can do applications now. Yesterday I couldn't write apps, but now I can write apps. No, it takes you years and years to do that. But setting up a batch file to be able to rotate a log every week on a server, I can do that in an hour. Probably two these days, maybe less. But those are the skills you focus on. But back to your problem now is that 4-year organizations that for some reason, maybe they think it's not hard enough. Maybe they just haven't ever thought of creating an IT degree. Those organizations aren't going to help you prepare for what you want to do in the future. Are you marketable with a computer science degree? You certainly are. Perhaps not as marketable on the IT side as you are on the programming side of things. But you've now spent 4 years or at least 2 years working towards a set of skills and getting through classes that if you're planning to get into IT, you'll never do that stuff again. You're not going to use C++ when you're managing a network, when you're managing a secure environment, when you're managing firewalls. You don't. You never touch those. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. Sometimes you can find a niche. I mentioned my daughter just getting her 4-year degree in IT. She got it from a well-known university in South Florida. So we really had to look around and find the right place that had recognized that this was a shortcoming in academia, because it is. It's a tremendous shortcoming in our 4-year university degrees. It kind of speaks to how slow they are to get anything going, how antiquated some of the things are that they are doing, is that there's no IT degrees, and there really should be. Can you imagine if we had IT degrees and these people came out of college with knowledge of operating systems and Linux and networking and databases? That's perfect for 2 years, but we don't do it for whatever. Some employers care that you just have a formal degree. And I guess I'm a good example of that because I have a business management degree. It was not a technical degree. And yet throughout my career, I worked in very technical jobs, all the way up into working in the cybersecurity industry as a systems engineer. That's how that worked out. That was one of those situations that people saw that I had the 4-year degree. And in the mind of some employers, just having the degree means that you are someone who can be trained. So you have qualified by going through that process and getting that piece of paper that you're a pretty smart person, and we can train you on other things too. And that's the way a lot of employers will look at that, especially when it comes to IT. Because imagine being an IT employer, and now imagine somebody walking in, they're not going to have an IT degree because very few people have this. So do they have other skills that they can pull from? Have they done other things with experience in the past? Do they know somebody in your company already? You mentioned the 3 things, which was a formal degree, some experience, and having an industry certification. Don't forget about the fourth thing, which is knowing somebody who works there. Not what you know, but who you know kind of thing, because that is actually quite important. So that might help you as well to get through some of the conundrum of this, to circumvent the weirdness that is IT and its lack of formal education in whatever we're doing here. Maybe that will help you too in figuring out where things go, or maybe it just confuses you further. In either case, maybe you look around a little more, see if you can find an organization, a four-year degree or a college that has a different twist on things, that's looking more at the IT side, that wants you to be more familiar with switches and routers and firewalls and databases and data center operations and those types of things. That would be a very valuable degree to have, I would think.
All right. Thank you. Sorry I fumbled a little bit earlier. I'm a big fan of yours. So.
I appreciate the call. Thank you for calling. Best of luck.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's one of those things where it just took a lot of figuring out. My daughter graduated from Barry University in South Florida. The Barry University program was a remote program. There were classes in our local area because I live in North Florida. She took some classes locally at a local facility. And then I think the last couple semesters was all online. But it was an IT degree. She got a degree in information technology, which was great. It's interesting because now even Barry's looking at this and going, do we still offer this IT degree or not? Like they even offer it and aren't sure if they should be offering it. I don't know what that's about. If anyone out there is in the world of academia can make me understand what it is about IT that they completely stay away from, I would love to know more about that. It's remarkable to have that there. Let's go back to the phones. To the 404 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jose in Sarasota. How are you, Professor?
Hey, Jose. Thanks for calling. Another Florida connection. What can we do for you, sir?
Yes, sir. Nice jersey you're wearing there. Are you being sponsored?
I'm not being sponsored. This is a pretty old one. These are the Melbourne Demons, not Melbourne, Florida, but Melbourne, Australia. The Australian rules football season for the Demons has been postponed because of the virus, but it starts on Saturday. So this is the COVID worry is over, at least the major part of it. So now we can go back to sports and do something else for a change. That's what that's about. And as I mentioned, they changed the logo a long time ago, but I got this when I was in Australia. So it also is a very sentimental to me as well. That's why I'm wearing a very unusual for wear sports labeled shirt on the stream. So thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, in regards to remote testing with CompTIA,
sure.
CompTIA downloads and runs their onvue application, which allows them to access your machine's microphone, camera, automation, and input monitoring, of course. The question is, could I segment my network, add a VM to a newly isolated lab, take the exam, and immediately erase the VM and disassemble everything after I pass?
I like the way you think. And as I mentioned, before they actually implemented this and told people how they were going to do it, I mentioned on a live stream that I probably would not allow them the level of access to my machine that they wanted. Because, by the way, it isn't even CompTIA's onvue application. It's Pearson View's onvue application. So it's even a third party whose application it is that is CompTIA is paying to do this. So we're already 3 or 4 steps away from any type of responsibility around the security aspects of this. There are significant security concerns with having someone have that level of access to your system to the point that it completely turns off your operating system so that the only thing that will run is this application. You aren't allowed to get access to your rest of your operating system because then you'd be able to use it. So it blanks out everything else. There are people on the CompTIA subreddit that have mentioned that they used a VM to do this and it worked fine. So I took special note of that. Not a lot of people are doing it, but they could. And I think if you use it, if you segment your network, very similar to how people would segment an Internet of Things on their network, which means you have a cable modem coming in, and usually there is a router, some type of wireless router, usually you put at the beginning of this. And what people will do is have a separate router on one end of this and another router on the other side. Really, you would have effectively 3 routers on your network. And the 2 routers that are in that second tier, one of them would be used for Internet of Things or things that you felt were risky. Maybe onvue fits into that scenario. And the other router is one that you would use to be able to connect to everything else on your network that is more private. So your local servers, your local computers, and they're all using the same internet connection, but because you're segmenting them with physical routers, which are effectively natting, in this case, natting twice in most scenarios, you're doing this natting, neither side can talk to the other. You're effectively firewalling off the onvue and Internet of Things network from the protected private network of all of your other stuff. Ultimately, that would be the best possible scenario, but I like the way you're thinking. At least I wouldn't give them full access to my computer. It would only be for this virtual machine, and that's what I would use for that piece of it. And people in the chat room are mentioning, well, virtual machines are natted by default. Yes, but they're still on your computer when you are using them this way. That does not necessarily prevent them from accessing your local machine. I'm really looking at this from a very broad perspective. If all you have is one machine, though, sure, you can do it that way. Although I don't think the natting is useful. In fact, it may not help you to nat the onvue device. That may cause problems with their software. You may have to use a shared network connection and have its own IP address to be able to do that. So that's where I would focus on that, is to have those capabilities and that functionality. I think that's whenever I start breaking down how I would segment out from a security perspective, that's probably the way I would do it. I think it's a great way to consider doing it. And I like the way you're thinking, because that's probably a pretty good idea. Now, to be fair, there have been a lot of people that have taken the exam using onvue. There's been no worries, no problems noted. There's been no announcements of any issues that are security related. One would hope that they would build their application to prevent somebody from doing that, but you don't know who the proctor is. You don't know who's connecting to this. You don't technically know how much access they have to your machines. While you're taking the test and they're watching you in the camera, do they have access to your file system? Can they go through your pictures? Can they see your whatever else you have on your computer? We don't know. And that's why I always tell people, maybe you might want to use a different machine for this, or a VM. And I think that's a great idea, Jose.
Great. Now that you mentioned that, do you know if they allow you to use a Linux machine, or is that functional or permitted?
The two.
If so, I would just re-image a spare machine with the, say, Kali Linux, do the test, and then re-image it back to Windows.
The only operating systems that onvue will support is Windows and Mac OS, at least natively. Now, you could, of course, have a Linux machine, and on that Linux machine, you could run a Windows VM and use the Windows VM for onvue, but you would not be able to use Linux natively with onvue. It's not supported by the software.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for what you do, Professor Messer.
I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. And what a good way to think about this. He's already thinking in his mind, I need to do this at home. I'd like to test at home. It's a great idea to test at home. I don't have to leave. I don't have to get dressed, to get in my car, drive somewhere. And if you have the right environment set up, this would not work. They would not allow me to take a test here, because you have to unplug every monitor. You have to physically disconnect everything, get rid of everything on the front. They probably tell me to get in a different room. This would not work. But if all you had a simple configuration, you could set up the room so that they were fine with it. Now, how do you protect everything else in your computer? It's a great thing to worry about. That's an important consideration. You just don't know what type of access these folks have to your computer, and I would not want them to have access to mine. So there's another good example of that. To the 941 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Maso. I'm Carlos. I'm calling from Sarasota, Florida.
Another Sarasota. Thanks for calling, Carlos. What can we do for you?
Yeah. First, I want to say thanks for everything you make for us. I passed my CCNA certification the last January, and now I have for the next Monday the test for Network Plus. But I just want to know for my next step to become a network administrator, what you recommend for me? What certification, Linux Plus or Security Plus, what certification you recommend?
So let me recap and see if I'm following. So you already have your CCNA. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Now you're taking Network Plus, which is kind of an unusual path to take, is starting with CCNA and kind of going, I don't want to say going backwards, but it is sort of a Network Plus is kind of considered the entry level of networking, and CCNA I wouldn't put into the category of entry level. And you can probably see the difference. You've already gone through CCNA, and you've already gone through all the command line, all the protocols, the routing, the switching, recovery from non-bootable systems. I mean, it's a difficult set of exams, especially if you did them earlier where they were two separate exams. What's driving the need to get the Network Plus?
Yeah, because I have the extra voucher to get it. It's another certification.
Okay, perfect. So no harm, no foul. It's another thing you can put on the list of things that HR can check off. Yeah. And that if you've got Network Plus and CCNA, it just solidifies the entire thing that you've got there, and no money out of your pocket. So why wouldn't you? Makes perfect sense to me. And if you still remember and you've worked with all the things that you did in your CCNA, you're probably going to do just fine on your Network Plus. There are very few things on Network Plus that are not already covered on CCNA, but there are some things. There's some cloud computing things. There's the cabling, for example, the categories of cable and the links and the distances aren't part of the CCNA. So there are things that you will have to go back and study on, but it's going to be a very easy study process for you to get to that point. So now that we've figured that part out, what was your question regarding the Network Plus exam?
Yeah, no, I want to become a network administrator. Okay. For this reason, I want to be sure, what you recommend for my next step. I want another certification, after that.
If you're doing anything with network administration, you want to get into networking, routing, switching, and even to some degree, some of the security side of things, because that's sort of the natural progression, is to move from the hardcore networking into more of a security perspective. It's all about Cisco these days. Everything is a Cisco certification. So maybe you leverage the Network Plus and the CCNA. Maybe at that point, I think you have the right qualifications to get that job, at least an entry-level job in network administration. I think that gets you in the room and at least gets you the conversations with people. The next step you could possibly take is a CCNP, some type of broader design certification, and being able to have that functionality there, have some knowledge of how to design the networks. Because if you're someone who's doing networking, you're going to have a whiteboard. You're going to constantly be writing on the whiteboard. You're drawing lines. You're trying to figure out where things happen to fit, figuring out what protocols go in what directions, how to integrate into the network address translations, where you fit the security pieces in, how it integrates into the cloud computing platform. That's more of the CCNP or the planning side of things, the design side of things. That might be a good next step. Or it may be that whoever you're looking to get a job from has some very specific products or technologies they use, and maybe you go to that particular manufacturer and get their specific certification. But I think if you stick to Cisco, at this point with networking and network administration, you really can't go wrong. Follow their path. They've got lots of pathways on their website. If you want to do this, they lay out for you exactly the road you should take for the best possible outcome. I think that's a great way to look at things. And I think it's one that is well respected in the industry. It gets you in the door for the interviews. And perhaps even more importantly, it is well respected by the other professionals in the industry as well. And ultimately, that's where you're going to want to be when you finally get your meeting with them and you tell them, oh, I've got this Cisco cert and this Cisco cert. They go, okay, so we know at least you understand this level of what we're trying to do, and we can understand your qualifications.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Mercer.
Thanks, Carlos. Best of luck. That's one whenever, and it comes up a lot in the chat room, and it comes up a lot in the people that call, is that there is a difference between Network Plus and the CCNA. the Cisco Certified Network Administrator certification, which is now a single exam. It's changed recently at the beginning of the year, February. That's a single exam that is testing you on your knowledge of Cisco switches, Cisco routers, and some of the protocols and technologies surrounding Cisco switches and Cisco routers. It's a very comprehensive exam. I would not consider it an entry-level exam. Some people I know do, and I guess that's fine, but it really isn't. It's a very complex exam that goes through some very complex networking technologies, and it's really designed for somebody who's looking to be a network administrator. The Network Plus exam is really entry-level into networking. In fact, people who get a Network Plus may not necessarily be going into network administration. They may be somebody who's a server administrator or somebody who's administering a network in a data center. And it's somebody who's planning to go into the router side of things or the switch side of things, or has decided, before I jump into the CCNA where I'm going to have to learn this stuff anyway, why don't I learn this much now? And then when I finally get into the CCNA and learning those things, it's so much easier because I've already got this foundation. I already know what port numbers are. I already know how to plug in the Ethernet cable. I already know there's signal going over these wires. I've already heard the term spanning tree protocol. I've already heard the term this and that and the other. So you've already got some foundational knowledge. So when you step into the Cisco world, it's not so much of a wave of information that is really rolling over you. You're at least in waist deep water, and you're having to work from there, which is still difficult, but a little bit easier than going out and having the waves go over your head. Let's go back to the calls. Let me quickly check here and make sure that we can go to the 720 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? Check your... There you are. Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I'm calling from Colorado.
Oh, Colorado. Welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, I have a question.
You may be listening on the stream.
Yes, I'm working in the military as an IT specialist.
Okay.
And I don't have any certification. And I'm planning to take my master's in cybersecurity. So I'm just wondering, what is your advice? Can I go for other masters, or I can start with any certification like Sec Plus?
It's an interesting conundrum, because I think a lot of people are wanting to start on the security side. In fact, I hear a lot of people, and if there's any place that schools and universities have sort of latched onto, it's the cybersecurity term. And they have created, in some cases, a cybersecurity program, whatever that means, because there is no such thing as a cyber that we would need to secure. There's some descriptions of cybersecurity that would encapsulate all things technically that need to be secure. This would be security of applications. This would be security of networks. It would be security of databases, that all things in this realm, including making applications more secure, would fall into the world of cybersecurity. I think that's a little broad, but we needed something to envelop what this ridiculous word is that we created called cybersecurity. Now, because you're in Colorado, you're working for the military, I can only assume you're with the Stargate program. So we're just going to assume that right out of the gate. Secondly, I think when you get into programs these organizations have created for cybersecurity, at least the ones that I've seen, they're very good overviews of security. They're very broad, of course, because cybersecurity is very broad. Most of the time, they're spending security on kind of the application side of things. I think it tends to lend itself over there. But it also envelops at least aspects of operating systems and networking in there as well. So you do get a kind of a nice mix across the board in most cases. Different organizations have a different idea of what a cybersecurity program is. So without knowing yours specifically, I think we can speak at least very broadly in that perspective. Now, you mentioned not having a strong foundation or a strong experience in the industry already. But the one thing, if you're getting into security, I'll mention this again, because I think it is an ongoing common thing to run into, is you really do need to have a good knowledge of networking. Anything you do in the security world, whether it's securing applications or securing networks, all has a very strong foundation in how things are communicating across that network. how people are able to access systems remotely. How are you supposed to protect a system from a remote attacker if you don't understand the process they took to get to you? So the one thing I would probably recommend is if you're going into that line of work or you're going into that particular training program or formal education program, try to get as much formal education and knowledge you can of the network as well. It can only help you, whether you end up going into security or not, it's going to help you in your career. So get that networking foundation. I think that's the best advice I could give.
Oh, thank you so much.
I appreciate the call. And notice he did not deny being part of the Stargate program. Just saying. Just going with that. To the 310 area code. Hi, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hey, how you doing, Professor Messer? My name is Rolando. I'm calling from the UK, but I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm just military stationed here.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for calling.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for your content. I started with A+. Now I'm all the way. I have my CCNA already.
Great.
Been working really hard. My question is basically I'm trying to, so based on doing my CCNA, I really fell in love with the CLI of Cisco, really got into networking. And so now I'm trying to set my path, and I would like to become a network security engineer. But the thing is that I'm having a really hard time even getting like a junior network engineer job because I have no experience whatsoever. So I have kind of like two questions in one. Basically, do you have any tips for landing that first like junior network engineer job? And also like what kind of path should I work towards to get into that network security engineer role in the future?
Well, I'll speak to you directly. My last job working for a third party for a different company other than my own was working as a senior systems engineer for a next generation firewall company. So I was that security systems engineer. That's the position that I had. And I got to talk to and meet with a lot, hundreds of people in many different organizations that were in charge of the network side of things and in charge of the security side of things, perhaps even more so. And every one of the people that I knew on the security side had a very strong foundation in networking. And I've already mentioned this in the study group already, but that's where that knowledge comes from and why I'm trying to get across to everyone how important the networking side of things is. If you're planning to get into IT security and secure a network and secure a database and secure your VPNs and secure everything in your organization, you have to know networking, not just know networking that switches and routers and how they work. You have to become an expert in networking. There's no way you'll know everything about networking. It's impossible to know everything there is to know about networks and protocols and dynamic routing, and there's just too much. But you can get a very strong foundation in this that you can then build upon. I think if I had to give advice, because you've now got your CCNA, that's an extremely strong start. It's a good thing to have on your resume. Now you have to have those four things. It's the four things I always mention when you walk into a job or you want to get a job or get a better job. You need those four things. One is a formal education. That helps. You don't have to have all four of these, but if you had all four, it would be ideal. A formal education, that can be a 2-year degree. It can be a 4-year degree. It can be some type of degree in the field that you would like to work on. So that's one thing to consider. The other is industry certifications. You already have that check mark on your CCNA that you at least have a fundamental knowledge of how to manage switches and routers made by Cisco, which is pretty much what everybody has. Thirdly on the list is having some type of experience. Now, you may be in a position right now in the military where you're getting that type of experience, or you may be doing some other completely different kind of job. So that's one where if you can have something to pull from, that's useful. If you know somebody who's already working in the industry that is doing this, it'd be great to do some moonlighting with them. It'd be great to spend some time on a weekend on a project where they need an extra pair of hands. Get any type of experience you need. It doesn't have to be paid experience, but it could be something where you're explaining to somebody in an interview, oh, I did help. Here was the project to help with. We implemented this type of routing infrastructure. We implemented this type of switches. We upgraded the switches. We set up this type of system. We connected them all with this type of fiber. Those are great stories to have because you have some practical knowledge of doing that. And you don't have to be the only one doing that in the project, but you were involved with it to have all of those pieces there. The fourth thing, and this is probably just as important as the other three, is knowing somebody who works in that company now. And they don't have to work in networking. They can work in marketing. They can work in accounting. They could just be somebody you know from some other thing that you do. It could be somebody you knew from the military. It could be somebody from your church. It could be somebody from a club that you participate with. But they work at that company already. Knowing someone who works there who can vouch for you and even give them your resume actually helps quite a bit. So if any of those things, if maybe you don't have the formal education, having the other three things that you could maybe do a little more of also helps. You can compensate a little bit for anything you might not have. Those are the things to focus on. The other thing is especially with networking, if you have your CCNA, nobody is going to allow you to take a job with them, come in the first day, and start assigning people onto different VLANs. They're not going to give you that CLI access right out of the gate. So you're going to have to start at the entry-level positions with those things, which is fine. That's where everybody starts. So if in your particular geography, if you're somewhere where there is a network operations center or a NOC, if there's a security operations center or a SOC, look for positions that are entry-level in those areas. And those may be great ones to send your resume in, especially a NOC position, which are usually just kind of a network-based help desk is really what it is. But you're monitoring the network. You're learning about the topologies. You're learning about the technologies that are running. When something breaks, you see how to fix them. You may not be the one typing into the console, but you're standing over the person who's doing it, and you're able to ask them questions. And you move out of those positions very, very quickly. If you're somebody who likes to learn and learn fast, you can move out of a network operations center into being that network administrator pretty darn quick. So it's not ever one thing. It's a mixture of things. It's a combination of all of these things together. It's your knowledge. It's your willingness to learn. It's the relationships you have with other people. You kind of have to bundle them all together, put together a strategy, and see if you can make that strategy work for you. A lot of people will sit at home and they'll just throw resumes into the internet and hope for the best. That is the worst possible scenario. That's not going to help you. You're just going to end up throwing resumes into the ether until maybe one of them sticks after 200 tries. If you can increase the percentage that you have of getting an interview, of getting the second interview, of getting a job offer by doing some of these very simple things, that's really going to help you in the long run. And I think it gives you some skills that you can use throughout your career because your next job is not going to be your last job. You'll continue to move up and move out and move around throughout your career because you'll have the skill set to be able to do that.
Awesome. Just one last thing. I basically wrote everything down. I really appreciate all the advice. So basically, I also was trying to do, just because in the situation that I'm in, I'm transitioning out of the military. So basically, I was just trying to prepare for the cyber side of things. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to do the Cisco, the new cyber ops cert, but the exam is not even going to be available until November.
Right.
So actually I switched to the CompTIA, the Cysa Plus. Do you feel like that has hold any value? Because I basically go on Indeed and I put like entry-level cyber, and there's literally like one job for the location that I'm interested.
You've done exactly what I tell people to do, which is if you're trying to figure out if something has value, especially certifications, because people ask me all the time, hey, what should my next cert be? I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what you want to do. I don't know what people are looking for. The value of a certification is based on what you plan to do with it. Now, at a very fundamental level, getting a certification teaches you something. Ideally, getting a certification teaches you something. I guess for some people, maybe not enough. But for the vast majority of us, I think once we go through the certification process and we take the exam, when we finally pass it, I think we all look back and say, wow, I learned something with that one, because we're usually trying to build on knowledge we don't have previously. So that is already sort of a baked in thing. We already know we're going to learn something. Now, what do we do with that? We got the piece of paper, we got the cert. Almost always, and I would say the vast majority of situations, we're using that credential to show other people so that we can get a job or that we can get a better job. So I often tell people to do exactly what you did. Go to your favorite online resume place, your job posting site. Go to the Indeeds of the world, the Dice.coms, the Monsters, whatever's out there in your area, and see what people are looking for. This, by the way, is also what I do when I'm trying to figure out what is the next course that I want to do. I do exactly the same thing because a lot of people have come to me over the last few years and say, are you planning to do a CISA Plus exam? Are you going to make a CISA Plus program? And I look at the numbers and I go to Google Trends and I go to Indeed and I go to Dice and I look around for who's asking for this. And relative to other things in the industry, it doesn't seem to have as much juice as everything else. That being said, I think the content on the CISA Plus is pretty spot on. It's the content that you would need to know to be familiar with networking and security in our industry. It's the tools like Nmap and tools like I'm trying to think of all the other things that asked for in that exam, but those are the things we use when we do our security techniques, when we're doing our port scans and our ping scans and trying to figure out how to get a banner off a device and all of those things that we deal with when in security and CISA. It's a pretty good mix. It's just nobody's asking for it. So when the direction that you were kind of leaning, I think was probably leaning that way because you know people are going to ask for the Cisco stuff. And the people that even don't know about the Cisco stuff have at least the Cisco name to stand on. They're looking, oh, that's a pedigree. That's a gold name in the industry. And if you have that certification, it must be worth something. You may be able to find a provider, though, and maybe you're trying to get in with one particular company, and it happens to be the company asking for CISA Plus. Well, there's the answer. That's what you do. You go get it so that you can go work with that one company. But I think for most of us, we're creating a spreadsheet. We're looking at all of the different companies in our area. We're in that spreadsheet putting down what the criteria they want. Do they want formal education? Yes. How much? This much. Do they want experience? Yes. How much experience? This much. Do they want industry certifications? Yes. What is certifications? These certifications. And then we have this big database to pull from where maybe we can start seeing some trends. Maybe in your geography, not as many people want a formal education and more people want this CompTIA certification. Or maybe you're seeing the Cisco certification crop up a lot. Or maybe it's another certification from Microsoft you weren't even thinking about, and suddenly everybody wants Azure certifications. But that's the only way you're going to know is if you go out and do the research. And that's another good way I talked about increasing the percentages. I think that's another great way to increase the percentage. Don't just throw resumes into the ether. Make it a strategy and figure out how to best play all of the things that you need to play on the board so that the game goes in your favor.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your feedback. Yeah, I completely agree with everything. The CISA Plus, I pretty much thought of it as, kind of future-proofing my career. If any cyber, entry-level cyber opportunities arise, I can maybe take advantage of them.
I would agree. It's good stuff on there. It may take some explaining in front of people that never heard of it before, but maybe you don't talk about the cert as much as you talk about the technologies you learned by getting the cert, because everybody can listen in and go, oh, well, tell me what you've done with Nmap. And then you've got another great conversation to have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your feedback.
Best of luck, Rolando. That's always the concern to me. And I think if somebody's planning to get that job or get the better job, you need to lay out I should probably do this in my geography, is lay out the spreadsheet and what I would look for. I gave you those columns. I just went down my list of 4 things, which was the formal education, the certifications, the experience in the industry. And the 4th one, of course, do I know somebody who works there? And who do I know? And should I send them a LinkedIn and get to know, just was looking at your company the other day. It was looking pretty good. Also, let me make the point that if you do know somebody who works at one of these companies that you would like to work for, even if they're not in IT, many of these companies have finders programs. They have employee referral programs for people that work there. I don't know if you know about the way the industry commonly works with recruiters, but third-party recruiters will find you and then present you to companies, and generally the recruiters are paid a good bit of money, sometimes a percentage of your annual salary, for bringing you in the door as a finder's fee. Well, that's usually quite a bit of money. So if a company can minimize how much they're spending for this finder's fee, that would be great. And what they'll do is tell their employees, hey, if you know anybody who wants to work here, give me their resume. Submit their resume with your name on it. And if we hire that person, we will give you money for bringing them to us. They give you a few $100, in which they come out way ahead in the long run by doing that. But you're also hiring people that know each other. And that's some of the best people to hire because you already know this person. You know how they work. You know that they'll come in on time. You know their work ethic. That helps as well. And there might be some third parties. In the industry, there's a lot of third-party providers, some value-added resellers, some temporary services companies, tech systems, and the local VARs that you use. Those might be other places to get in and get more familiar with the industry and be able to work with people that are around as well. I think whenever I start looking at what do I do from a strategy perspective, it's always going to be hard. You know, if this was easy, everybody would already have the job. And especially now that we're trying to ramp up the economy again, we're trying to get things going, it's going to take a while. It's going to take months. It may take a year or two to ramp up to where we were before. That ramping process, people are going to start rehiring. They're going to start projects up. They're going to need people to be able to man these switches and routers and servers and cloud-based systems and everything else. You're going to need to be ready for this. So get the certifications you need, get your resume together, maybe have somebody who does this for a living have a look at your resume and give you an excellent resume, a good layout. Build out the spreadsheet for your geography. Find every major company in your area, put them on the spreadsheet, look at their website, see what they're asking for, see what jobs are open, track when these jobs open up and when they close up. Find out what people are doing. Contact people you know. Ask people in your church. Ask people in the clubs that you attend. Ask people in your kids' school where they work, and are they looking for IT people? Do you know someplace that's looking for IT people? Be your own recruiter. You're the best one to be able to fit yourself into the right job. And we can have another conversation about whether recruiters are good or not. I've had some exceptional experiences with recruiters in my career. I've had some pretty horrible experiences, not as bad as others, but not great experiences with recruiters. It varies widely. Recruiters are not something that you do on a whim or you take a cold call from. A recruiter is somebody you set up a relationship with that you work with over years and years. In my line of work, I think I worked with maybe 2 recruiters. And it's one of those things where they would follow you from job to job. And whenever you wanted some additional help, you call them up, go, okay, I'm ready. I've been here 3 years, ready to make the move. See what you can find. Like, okay, I know exactly your skill set. We've talked before. I already know what you're doing. I got you in the database. Let's go. And we go. It's hard to find the good ones, but once you do, you stick with them. Well, that takes care of another hour of Q&A. We went through all the hours, the first hour of our back and forth. I asked you questions. We're going to do another one of these next month. If you ever are wanting to join us on the live stream, you're watching this replay and wondering, how can I participate? We would love to have you here. Visit professormesser.com/calendar. You can lock yourself in to another set of questions and answers. If you like the ones that we did this week, come back next week. We have a Security Plus study group a week from today. We'll do exactly the same thing, except with a whole new round of brand new Security Plus questions. I create all new questions every month, so it's always something new. We'd love to have you come back and join us. Thanks for being here. Thank you for attending in the first hour. Thank you for your questions in the chat room and your calls. We could not do this without you, and we sure do appreciate you. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.